The autumn leaves crunched beneath neat-rolled, Lily's-worn sneakers as she made her way home from Jefferson Elementary. Her pink backpack bounced with each step filled with homework assignments and the apple she'd forgotten to eat at lunch. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street, painting the quiet suburban neighborhood in golden hues that made everything feel peaceful and safe walking. Beside her, matching her pace with the patience of a seasoned professional, was Rex. To most people, he appeared to be simply a large German shepherd, beautiful, well-groomed, and obviously loved. His black and tan coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. But Rex was far more than just a family pet. Hidden beneath his calm exterior was the heart of a warrior, the mind of a protector, and the training of an elite police canine. 3 years ago, Rex had been at the top of his game, working alongside Lily's father, Detective Mike Harrison, as one of the city's most decorated drug detection and apprehension dogs. Together, they had solved countless cases, seized millions of dollars in narcotics, and brought dangerous criminals to justice. Rex had been fearless in the line of duty, willing to put himself between his partner and any threat. But a severe hip injury sustained during a warehouse raid had forced him into early retirement at just 7 years old. Mike had made the decision without hesitation, which wouldn't be retired to just anyone. He would come home with the Harrison family, where he could live out his golden years surrounded by love and comfort. What Mike hadn't anticipated was how naturally Rex would transfer his protective instincts from his police partner to his partner's daughter. From the moment Rex arrived at their home, he had appointed himself as Lily's shadow and guardian. He slept beside her bed each night, walked her to the school bus every morning, and somehow always knew when she would be returning home in the afternoon. Mike often joked that Rex had better parental instincts than most humans, but deep down he knew it wasn't a joke. At Alos, they walked down the familiar street. Lily chattered away about her day, telling Rex about the spelling test she'd aced and the funny thing her friend Emma had said during lunch. Rex listened with the attention of someone who genuinely cared, his ears occasionally twitching in response to her voice. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect picture of childhood innocence, a little girl and her beloved dog, without a care in the world. But Rex's senses were always working, always scanning, always evaluating. His training had taught him to notice things that others missed: subtle changes in atmosphere, the sounds that didn't belong, the smells that carried warning. As they turned onto Elm Street, still 3 blocks from home, something shifted in the air around them. Rex's ears pricked forward almost imperceptibly. His nostrils flared as he caught a scent that made his muscles tense beneath his fur: cigarette smoke mixed with engine oil, leather, and something else. Its sharp metallic smell of adrenaline and aggression. His pace slowed just slightly enough to put himself half a step ahead of Lily instead of beside Heron. The distance barely visible around the corner of an old brick building. Shadows moved with purpose. The rumble of motorcycle engines had been silent for several minutes, which meant they were parked, waiting. Rex's tail, which had been wagging gently as Lily spoke, went still. Lily continued her cheerful monologue, completely unaware that the day was about to take a dramatic turn. She didn't notice Rex's subtle shift in posture, didn't see the way his eyes had sharpened with focus, didn't realize that every muscle in his body was now coiled like a spring. She was still just a 9-year-old girl, walking home from school, trusting in the safety of her small town and the comforting presence of her 4-legged best friend. But Rex knew better. Somewhere ahead, in the lengthening shadows of the late afternoon, trouble was waiting. His nostrils flared again, catching more of that aggressive scent, and his lips pulled back slightly from his teeth, not in a snarl, but in preparation. Whatever was coming, he would be ready. Whatever threatened his girl, he would stop. The peaceful afternoon was about to become anything but peaceful, and Rex was the only one who sensed it coming. Lily's route home had been the same for 2 years now, ever since her parents had decided she was old enough to walk to and from school by herself. Well, not exactly by herself. Rex had been part of the arrangement from the beginning. The path took her through the heart of their neighborhood, past Mrs. Chen's flower garden, around the corner by the old oak tree where she and her friends had carved their initials, and through the narrow alley between Morrison's hardware store and the abandoned barber shop that led directly to her. Stritha alley was her favorite part of the walk. It was like a secret passage shaded by the buildings on either side and decorated with colorful graffiti that her father insisted was actually quite artistic. During the day it felt mysterious and cool, a perfect shortcut that saved her almost 5 minutes. Her parents had walked the route with her dozens of times, deemed it safe, and trusted Rex to keep her protected. Today, as Lily turned into the familiar opening of the alley, humming a song she'd learned in music class, she was completely absorbed in her own little world. She was thinking about the book report that was due next week, and whether she wanted to write about Charlotte's Web or try something more challenging. She was wondering if her mom would let her have a friend over for dinner, and hoping that her dad would be home early enough to help her with the math homework that had been giving her trouble. Rex, however, was thinking about entirely different things. At the far end of the alley, barely visible in the shadows cast by the afternoon sun, 4 men leaned against 3 motorcycles, Their leather jackets bore patches that told stories Lily couldn't read and wouldn't understand them, of brotherhood territory and a way of life that existed far outside her innocent world. They had been waiting for almost 20 minutes, smoking cigarettes and sharing crude jokes, but their attention sharpened the moment they spotted the small figure entering their trap. The tallest of them, a man with graying beard and arms covered in tattoos, nudged his companions and pointed. "Well, well," he said quietly, his voice carrying a tone that would have made any parent's blood run cold. "Look what we got here." They had been expecting someone different, maybe a businessman taking a shortcut or a teenager they could intimidate into handing over lunch money. A 9-year-old girl with a dog wasn't what they'd planned for, but in their twisted logic, it might be even better, easier to scare, less likely to fight back, and if she had wealthy parents. Rex saw them before Lily did, his eyes trained by years of police work to spot danger in any form, immediately assessed the threat for adult males strategically positioned to block both ends of the alley, body language suggesting predatory intent, sense of tobacco, alcohol, and aggression. The way they moved, shifting position as soon as they spotted Lily, confirmed what his instincts were already screaming. This was a trap. Without breaking stride or showing any outward sign of alarm, Rex made his move. He stepped smoothly in front of Lily, positioning himself between her and the men ahead. His movement was so natural that Lily barely noticed, still lost in her thoughts about homework and dinner plans. The lead biker stepped forward, blocking the path completely. His smile was cold and calculating as he addressed the little girl, who was still walking toward him with complete innocence. "Hey there, sweetheart," he called out, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" The words hit Lily like cold water. She stopped walking, suddenly aware that something was very wrong. Her eyes darted from the man blocking her path to his companions, who were now spreading out to surround her. Fear began to crawl up her spine as she realized she was trapped, but Rex wasn't trapped. Rex was exactly where he needed to be. Low rumbling growl emerged from deep in his chestnut, the playful growl of a pet, but the warning sound of a trained police dog who had identified a threat. The sound was so deep and powerful that it seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating through the air and immediately changing the atmosphere in the alley. Lily's small hand instinctively gripped Rex's leash, tighter, though she barely understood why. The dog had never growled like that before, never sounded so dangerous. But instead of being scared of Rex, she felt safer. Whatever was happening, Rex was on her side. The bikers' initial laughter died in their throats as they heard that growl. It wasn't the sound they'd expected from what they thought was just a family pet. There was something professional about it, something that spoke of training and experience and a very serious willingness to use violence if necessary. But they had come too far to back down now, and there were 4 of them against 1 little girl and 1 dog. The odds still seemed to be in their favor. They had no idea how wrong they were. X's eyes never left their hands, his ears cataloging every sound, his nose sorting through the complex mixture of scents that told him everything he needed to know about these men's intentions. The wire-taut tension in the air was something he recognized from his police-dazed moment before action, when words stopped and training took over. In the distance, a car horn blared and Lily found herself desperately wishing her father was there. But he wasn't in this moment. With danger closing in from all sides, Rex was all she had, and for these men who thought they had cornered an easy target, Rex was about to prove that he was more than enough. The standoff in the alley stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The 4 men had formed a loose circle around Lily and Rex, their initial confidence wavering slightly in the face of the dog's obvious hostility. The tallest biker, clearly the leader, decided it was time to test just how serious this pet really was. "Nice mutt, you got their little girl," he said, his voice carrying a mocking tone as he took a slow, deliberate step forward. His hands were held out in a gesture that might have looked unthreatening to an untrained observer, but Rex's experienced eyes caught the subtle signs of someone preparing to make a grab. The man's weight was shifting to the balls of his feet, his shoulders were tensing. His pupils were dilated with adrenaline. Every aspect of his body language screamed threat to the trained police dog. Rex's response was immediate and unmistakable. His tail went rigid, standing straight out behind him like a warning flag. His hackles rose, making him appear even larger and more intimidating than his already impressive 75 pounds. His ears pressed forward, focused entirely on the approaching threat. Lee felt her heart hammering in her chest. She had never seen Rex look like this, like a wolf instead of the gentle companion who slept at the foot of her bed, but she could sense that his aggression wasn't directed at her. If anything, his positioning made it clear that he was her shield against whatever these men intended. The leader took another step, now close enough that Rex could smell the stale beer on his breath and see the crude tattoos that covered his knuckles. "Come on, doggy," he taunted. "Let's see what you're really made of." Behind them, one of the other bikers was moving to flank their position. Rex's training kicked in automatic. Allow the enemy to surround you. Never lose track of multiple threats. Never let them get behind your principle in one fluid motion. He pivoted 90 degrees, pushing Lily gently but firmly toward the brick wall of the hardware store while keeping himself positioned to face all 4 attackers. Stay behind me, Lily, Rex seemed to say with his body language, though he never took his eyes off the threats surrounding them. Lead biker saw his opportunity and took it with Lily pressed against the wall and Rex momentarily focused on the flanking movement. He lunged forward and grabbed for her bright pink backpack, intending to yank her away from her protege. Was the worst mistake he could have made. Rex exploded into action with a speed and ferocity that transformed the quiet alley into a war zone. His bark wasn't the friendly woof of a family petty, was the trained warning bark of a police canine, designed to freeze suspects in their tracks and alert every officer within a quarter mile that backup was needed. Immediately, the sound was deafening in the confined space, bouncing off the brick walls and concrete ground like thunder. It was the bark that had announced drug raids that had preceded the capture of armed fugitives that had struck fear into the hearts of criminals across the city. For 3 years of active duty, the bikers stumbled backward, their swagger evaporating in the face of Rex's obvious expertise. This wasn't just a dog, this was a weapon with 4 legs and 42 teeth, and he clearly knew how to use both. But the leader wasn't ready to give up. Embarrassed by his retreat and angry at being intimidated by what he still thought was just an unusually aggressive pet, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy chain. The metal links caught the light as he wrapped one end around his fist, leaving about 3 feet of chain to use as a weapon. Stupid mutt, he snarled. Let's see how tough you are now, Lily gasped, pressing herself harder against the wall. She had never been so scared in her life, but she had also never felt so protected. Rex stood between her and danger like an immovable force, his entire body radiating controlled violence and absolute determination. Rex's eyes locked onto the chain, his tactical mind immediately assessing this new threat. Chain weapons were dangerous, could cause serious injury, and their reach made them difficult to counter. But Rex had faced armed suspects before. He had been shot at, had weapons swung at him, had gone toe-to-toe with some of the most dangerous criminals in the city. A biker with a chain was just another Tuesday at the office. The man raised the chain above his head, preparing to bring it down on the dog that stood between him and his intended victim. Rex shifted his stance, muscles coiling like springs, every sense focused on the weapon that was about to be used against him. Aware, in the back of her mind, through the haze of terror, Lily remembered something her father had told her once when she'd asked why Rex sometimes seemed different from other dogs. More serious, more watchful. If Rex ever decides to protect you, sweetheart, her father had said, nothing on this earth will stop him. As the chain began its descent toward Rex's head, Lily realized she was about to find out exactly what her father had meant. The chain whistled through the air, but Rex was no longer where it expected to find him. Years of police training had taught him that the best defense against a weapon was to never be where your attacker thought you were. He moved like liquid lightning, flowing to his left and forward, simultaneously turning what should have been a defensive position into an aggressive assault. The chain struck the concrete where Rex had been standing a split second before, sending up sparks and a sharp crack that echoed through the alley. But Rex was already inside the man's reach, his powerful jaws clamping down on the biker's forearm with the precise force of a professional who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. Rex's bite wasn't meant to cause permanent damage. Police training had taught him the difference between subduing and destroying, but it was certainly meant to stop the threat immediately and completely. The biker's scream of pain and surprise filled the alley as the chain dropped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. The other 3 men surged forward, but Rex was ready for them. This was what he had been trained for: multiple attackers, chaotic situations, protecting his principal while neutralizing threats. His police instincts took over completely, transforming him from pet to professional. In the space of a heartbeat, he released the first attacker and spun to face the next threat, his bark coming in rapid, controlled bursts that served multiple purposes. Each bark was a warning to his attackers, a reassurance to Lily and Hopophilia, signaled to anyone within earshot that help was needed. The second biker tried to rush him from the right, but Rex was faster. He dodged the man's clumsy charge and used the attacker's own momentum against him, positioning himself so that the man stumbled over one of the parked motorcycles and crashed to the ground in a tangle of chrome and leather. 2 down to go, and Rex was just getting started. Lily crouched against the brick wall, tears streaming down her face, but her voice rang out clear and strong. Rex, come here. She wasn't calling him away from the fight somehow. Even in her terror, she understood that retreat wasn't an option. She was calling to him the way she'd heard her father call his name during training sessions in their backyard, giving him a voice to focus on, a reminder of what he was fighting to protect. The third attacker had learned from his companion's mistakes. Instead of rushing blindly forward, he circled carefully, looking for an opening. Rex tracked his movement with the patience of a predator, keeping himself positioned between the threat and Lily while maintaining awareness of the fourth man, who was still looking for his own opportunity to strike. The careful attacker feinted left, then dove right, trying to get past Rex to grab Lily directly. It was a reasonable strategy against an ordinary dog, but Rex wasn't ordinary. He had been trained to predict human behavior, to read the subtle tells that preceded every action. X met the man's dive with a perfectly timed intercept, his shoulder checking the attacker in mid-lep and sending him sprawling across the alley. The impact was solid and satisfying, not enough to cause serious injury, but definitely enough to discourage any thoughts of a second attempt. The fourth biker, seeing his companions scattered and defeated, made a decision that probably saved his life. He turned and ran, abandoning his motorcycle and his friends in favor of getting as far away from the German Shepherd as possible. X let him go. His job was to protect Lily, not to pursue fleeing threats. The alley, which had been filled with violence and chaos just moments before, suddenly went quiet, except for the groaning of the defeated attackers and the sound of Lily's frightened breathing. Rex stood in the center of it all, his head held high, his eyes still scanning for potential threats, his body language making it clear that he was ready for round two if necessary, but round two wouldn't be necessary. From somewhere nearby, a woman's voice called out, "I'm calling the police." A door slammed and the sound of running footsteps echoed from the street. The bikers looked at each other with the sudden realization that their easy score had turned into a complete disaster. They had come looking for a victim and, instead, had found themselves on the wrong end of a one-sided fight with a dog who was clearly much more than he appeared to be. And now the police were coming. The distinctive wail of sirens began to build, in the distance, still far away, but getting closer fast. The sound sent a shiver of panic through the remaining attackers, but to Rex it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Backup was coming. His message had been received. The lead biker, still clutching his injured arm, looked at Rex with a mixture of fear, pain, and grudging respect. "What the hell kind of dog is that?" he muttered. Rex's tail wagged once in friendliness, but in satisfaction. If they had to ask, they had learned their lesson. To light the fight was over, but Rex knew it wasn't finished. Not until Lily was completely safe, not until the threats were neutralized permanently, and not until he was absolutely certain that his girl was going home unharmed. The sirens were getting louder now, and Rex allowed himself a small moment of professional pride. Mission accomplished. His principal was secure, the threats had been neutralized, and backup was en route. Just another day at the office for a retired police canine who had never really retired from the most important job of his life, keeping his family safe. The sirens grew louder and more urgent as they approached, their wailing cry cutting through the afternoon air like a cavalry charge. Red and blue lights began to flash at the mouth of the alley, painting the brick walls in alternating colors of law and order. For Rex, the sight and sound of police backup arriving was as familiar and comforting as a favorite song. He had heard that same sound hundreds of times during his active duty, always knowing it meant that help was on the way and justice was about to be served. To police cruisers screeched to a halt at both ends of the alley, effectively trapping the remaining bikers, who were still trying to gather their wits and plan their escape. Officers poured out of the vehicles with the practiced efficiency of professionals who had responded to countless emergency calls, their hands moving automatically to their weapons as they assessed the situation. The first officer through the alley entrance was Detective Mike Harrison, Rex's former partner and Lily's father. He had been in his office reviewing case files when the call came through, reports of a disturbance in the alley near Jefferson Elementary, possible assault in progress. Child involved. The address had made his blood run cold, and he had broken every traffic law in the book. "Getting there, Lily," he called out, his voice cracking with relief and fear as he spotted his daughter pressed against the wall, tears streaming down her face. But clearly unharmed, he holstered his weapon and ran toward her, dropping to his knees and sweeping her into his arms. "Daddy," Lily sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. They tried to hurt me, but Rex saved me." Mike looked over his daughters, head at his former partner who stood in the center of the alley like a sentinel, still alert and ready, despite the arrival of backup. The scene around Rex told a story that Mike had no trouble reading. 3 bikers in various stages of defeat. 1 motorcycle knocked over, a chain lying forgotten on the ground, and the unmistakable signs of a canine officer who had successfully protected his principal. "Good boy," Rex, Mike said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy." The other officers were already taking the situation in hand with professional efficiency. The injured bikers were separated and checked for weapons. Their motorcycles were secured as evidence, and witness statements were being taken from the neighbors who had called in. The disturbance officer, Sarah Martinez, Mike's current partner, approached him with her notepad ready. "Looks like your dog hasn't forgotten his training," she said with a slight smile. "The perps are claiming they were just talking to her, but the evidence suggests otherwise." Mike's jaw tightened as he thought about what could have happened if Rex hadn't been there. "What are we looking at for charges?" Attempted kidnapping at minimum, maybe assault, definitely menacing. Plus, they've got outstanding warrants. This wasn't their first rodeo." Sarah glanced at Rex, who was now sitting calmly beside Lily, but still scanning the area with professional thoroughness. "Your partner there probably saved her life." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about what had happened. Mrs. Chen appeared with a thermos of hot chocolate for Lily. The owner of Morrison's hardware store came out to offer his security. Camera footage. Neighbors who had only known Rex as the friendly family dog walked by and looked at him with new respect and understanding. Later, That evening, after the statements had been given and the bikers had been transported to jail, the Harrison family sat in their living room trying to process what had happened. Lily was wrapped in her favorite blanket, still shaken but safe, while Mike sat beside her on the couch. Rex lay on the floor, nearby, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes were alert and watchful. Even in the safety of his own home, his protective instincts remained active. He had done his job that afternoon, but his job never really ended. Rex is a hero, Lily said quietly, reaching down to stroke his fur. He saved me from those bad men. Mike knelt beside his former partner, looking directly into those intelligent, dark eyes that had been his companion through so many dangerous situations. You did your job today, partner, he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude and pride. You protected what matters most. Rex's tail wagged slowly, acknowledging the praise, but his expression remained serious and professional. He had always understood that his most important assignment wasn't chasing criminals or finding drugs, it was keeping his family safe. Today had just been a reminder that retirement didn't mean the end of duty. The local news picked up the story within hours. Retired police dog saves 9-year-old from gang attack, ran on the evening broadcast, complete with interviews from witnesses and a brief statement from Detective Harrison, thanking the community for their support. But for Rex, the media attention was irrelevant. What mattered was the little girl sleeping safely in her bed upstairs, protected by locks and alarms, and the vigilant presence of a dog who would never truly retire from the most important job he'd ever had. As the house settled into quiet for the night, Rex took up his usual position at the foot of Lily's bed. His body was relaxed, but his senses remained sharp, cataloging every sound and scent that moved through their home. Somewhere out there in the darkness there might be other threats, other dangers that could harm his family, but they would have to go through him first, and Rex had proven today that going through him was not a journey that anyone would survive unscathed. The little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of homework and friends and all the innocent concerns of childhood, protected by the unwavering vigilance of a police K-9 who understood that some duties transcend retirement, some partnerships last forever, and some love is worth fighting for with everything you have. In the morning she would wake up safe in her own bed, ready to face another day with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that no matter what dangers the world might hold, Rex would always be there to stand between her and harm, and Rex would be ready, because that's what partners do. They watch each other's backs. They never leave anyone behind, and they understand that the badge might retire, but the oath to protect and serve lasts forever.